Billy Blue, my knight in shining brindle. Welcome to another episode of A Poet Reads to Write. Today I would like to celebrate some of my favourite films. You know, some of those art forms that I return to time and time again. Oh my goodness. In particular in this video, I thought I might celebrate the film The Wrestler, The Hours, and Keeping Mum. Just three of my personal favourites of all time. All right, here we go. Film one, Darren Aronofsky's magnificent film starring Mickey Rourke, The Wrestler. I love Mickey Rourke in Sin City as well, but for me, actually, I don't watch many violent movies, so it's a bit of a surprise that I do enjoy Sin City so much. But I do love Mickey Rourke in the Sin City films, and that, you know, turning those wonderful graphic novels into that incredible feature film type situation. But for me, oh boy, Mickey Rourke, his performance in The Wrestler. This is a film, if you don't know it, I would really recommend you search it out and watch it. It's a very, very powerful, moving motion picture. The film really explores the idea of male, toxic masculinity, what it is like to be socialized as a little boy within that culture of masculinity and ways of being a man, and the damage that it does to a psychic headspace, and the way that damage can be then, wrought onto the body through self-harming. It's a very, very powerful picture. If you love wrestling, you will also love it, because it is a wonderful celebration of the place of wrestling in contemporary American, particularly working class type culture. It's a wonderful film. It's not just an interrogation of the costs to men of being socialized within that culture of toxic masculinity. It's not just a serious film with a message to beat you over the head with. It is also a grand celebration of the sport, the theatre of professional wrestling. It's a marvelous film. I just love it. And one of the other things about the film that for me really stands out, when Aronofsky made this film, he commissioned Bruce Springsteen, to write an acoustic song to glow with the film and to be the closing, as the closing credits come. And I think Bruce Springsteen, in his song, also called, of course, The Wrestler, it's a very powerful song called One-Legged Dog. When Bruce Springsteen wrote this song, a lot of people didn't get the metaphorical nature of a one-legged dog. And for literalists, the idea of having a dog so harmed that it only had one leg left was just too much for their heads to get around. And a lot of people apparently really hated this song. They didn't get that it was a powerful metaphor for harm and for self-harm and for what it is to live with the trauma of that. It's a very, very powerful song. I listen to very little popular music or rock music, so I don't listen to Bruce Springsteen as a rule at all. But this particular song, One-Legged Dog, that is the feature song for The Wrestler, it is a very, very powerful song for my money. So this is a poem that I have written in celebration of this wonderful film by Darren Aronofsky, for Mickey Rourke's performance as The Wrestler, and for this magnificent Bruce Springsteen song. My poem is called One-Legged Dog. No more the boss, My drive to self-harm is likely to end in care. How to shield the act of cutting from snooping restraint, to ram relief through this quarrel with blood. When you're on the ropes, it's what hits the floor. 2. The film opens in tableau byline glory. 100 kilo of gift-wrapped muscle, those steroids have broken his heart. And a nosedive, milked for all it's worth, is an old school low shot ending in a trailer park where the toxic push and shove of the passion pantomime of brutes and idols, all crowned by a staple guns, thorns and razor wire under the spotlights of the ring. An ear-splitting mob adoring the best of him. Scapegoat on the ropes. 3. As credits roll, his aging burnt scarecrow bling and gravel pit of piercings and black leather spoiling bruise. Bet you slump a one-trick pony when the blood hits the floor. Oh boy, The Wrestler, what a movie. It always brings me undone. But it is a movie that I return to often. And talking about movies that really should come with a trigger warning, for me, a movie that really does leave me very vulnerable, is that incredible film by Stephen Daldry and David Hare, The Hours, that remarkable film that is recreating part of the life, an imaginary life of Virginia Woolf. It's a remarkable film that, of course, is not actually a film of any particular novel by Virginia Woolf. It's actually a film version of this novel by Michael Cunningham. And this little tiny gem of a novel, if you've never read it, I highly recommend it. Michael Cunningham, The Hours. It is a remarkable small gem of a novel. I guess it's a novella, really. It recreates the life of Virginia Woolf, of a character from within the novel by Virginia Woolf, Mrs. Dalloway, and a reader of the novel, Mrs. Dalloway. So you've got these 3 parallel stories. And the way Michael Cunningham does this, I don't read a lot of self-consciously postmodernist literature. I really don't get it, and it really goes over the top of my head. I don't really know how to engage with it. But one postmodernist short gem of a novel that I just love is this one by Michael Cunningham, The Hours. If you've tried to read Virginia Woolf before and you've always struggled with her, stream of consciousness is not always a difficult form of fiction, a genre of fiction, if you like, to get into. How do you read a novel, which is often with Virginia Woolf, some of them are 400 or 500 pages long. How do you read a novel of that length where nothing happens, where you are simply inside the inner monologue of a character going about, maybe a day in their life? It's a remarkable achievement. The writing is just perfect. It's absolutely magnificent writing. But how do you read something like that where nothing happens? It's not always easy. So if you want a way into Virginia Woolf, if you maybe tried it before and like me, you've really struggled with the stream of consciousness. One way into Virginia Woolf, it was certainly my way in, my baptism into Woolfism was this novel by Michael Cunningham. Once I read this and saw the film, I don't know, something opened up for me. And all of a sudden I had my way into Virginia Woolf. And now I just love everything she writes. And I read and read and read. I just love her to bits. I can't understand why I couldn't read her 20 years ago. So if you want a way into the stream of consciousness of Virginia Woolf, I really recommend this magnificent little postmodernist gem, Michael Cunningham. It doesn't take itself too seriously. It's just a lot of fun. It's beautifully written. I love the way he just weaves these three parallel narratives together. It's very moving, very powerful. I really recommend it. The other things, of course, for Virginia Woolf, if you want to weigh in, little things like this, again, these little jewels, these little essays that she's written, A Room of One's Own, the classic feminist essay, of course. It's a marvellous little gem of a thing to read. And then you've got this one, How Should One Read a Book? Another wonderful little essay that Woolf wrote about literary fiction, about your way into a text. It's a marvellous little thing. You can see how small it is. Beautifully written. So these are just terrific ways into Virginia Woolf. And this is another delightful one. Look at that magnificent cover. It's beautiful, isn't it? Oh my boy. And this is just a lovely little thing called The London Scene. A wonderful celebration, if you like, of Bloomsbury, of that part of that, London suburb, and of that literary milieu that gathered around that little place in London. It's a wonderful little celebratory essay, this. Marvellous. And my goodness, look at that cover. Oh. And then, of course, for me, I always, particularly when approaching someone like Virginia Woolf, it can be quite difficult. Another way into the fiction for me, of course, is by getting to know, Virginia Woolf, her husband, Leonard Woolf, the Jewish publisher, and Fabian socialist. And their partnership. And as I've got to know a little bit about both Virginia and Leonard and their partnership with one another, that's been, for me, another way into this wonderful world of the fiction. Of course, you've got, originally the gossipy Jobs for the Boys, the biography of Virginia written by her nephew, Quentin Bell. This is I guess it's a fabulous read. It is a lot of fun. I'm not always completely taken by this one, but it is a fun book to read, I guess. The really great biography of Woolf, as you can see, it's quite a brick. But this is by the English professor Hermione Lee, and it's just called Virginia Woolf. If you can think you can get through the length, this is a marvellously written, it is actually a fun biography to read, despite the length. It is quite a page turner. I think Hermione Lee really she's a beautiful writer herself, and she does have a great narrative thrust, momentum, if you like, to this biography. It is very detailed. And it eschews theory completely. It's really looking at the wonderfully complicated interrelationships between Virginia's life story and her writing life, and the way the life story weaves in and out of the making of the novels. So to that extent, it is a wonderful book, and it really, again, gives you many ways into some of these stream of consciousness novels, and the way Virginia did often mine her own life story, like all writers do, I guess, in the making of those wonderful novels. So this is a great biography if you're interested. But for me, again, another great key for me to getting into Virginia Woolf was this fabulous biography. This is a biography of the partnership of Leonard and Virginia called Outsiders Together, by Natania Rosenfeld. And Rosenfeld, in this biography of a partnership, not really of Virginia, it's equally on Leonard, this book. And this book really brings to bear on the partnership, on the telling of their partnership story. It really brings to bear, race theory and sex theory. Don't let that put you off, though. This is a magnificently written book. For me, this was one of the grandest introductions I've ever had to the world of Virginia Woolf. It's really opened everything right up for me. This is a magnificent book, I think. For my money, this is the best thing that's been written on Virginia Woolf, probably in the 21st century so far. I really do love this little book. If you want another key, another way in to the complicated world that is the stream of consciousness of Virginia Woolf, this is marvelous, and it's really fun looking at Virginia through her partnership with Leonard. And then, of course, I'm about to read you a poem in response to this marvellous film. This film, The Hours, by Stephen Daldry and David Hare. David Hare, of course, wrote the script, that famous English playwright, and Daldry was the director of the film. It's an incredible film starring Nicole Kidman, Julianne Moore, and Meryl Streep. It's a marvellous film, very, very moving. As I said, for me, it really should come with a trigger warning. I have to be very careful that if I am watching The Hours, I'm not also drinking. It really brings me undone. It's a very, very powerful movie, but you do need to be careful watching it. It is marvellous though. I'm not usually a big fan of Nicole Kidman. I don't think I've ever seen anything else with Kidman that I've liked at all. But her performance, in The Hours, whew, remarkable. And of course, the film also has that fantastic Phillip Glass score, that minimalist score on piano. It's haunting, utterly unforgettable. So the film really just comes together. It's beautifully written by David Hare, impeccably directed by Daldry. The film score by Phillip Glass is just magnificent, an absolute jewel. But I do love minimalist classical music, and I am a big fan of Phillip Glass. And as I said, the performances of Moore, Streep and Kidman, oh boy, it is a remarkable film. But when I wrote my poem in response to that incredible film, I also riff off that wonderful mid-late 20th century poet Stevie Smith. You know, here's a wonderful biography of Stevie Smith by Francis Spalding. This again, it's just a great page turner. I really enjoy reading this, and this also really engages with, you know, Stevie Smith's often struggles with mental health, with depression, and the way she wrote about that and riffed off that in her life. This is a marvellous biography if you want a really fun biography of Stevie Smith. But it is also, as I said, very moving in the way it evokes Stevie Smith's own battle with depression. And Stevie Smith, she was also the victim of a lot of sexism, you know, in that mid-20th century milieu. You know, we now know that Stevie Smith was a very, very major poet. You know, look at this, the work that she has left behind. But not only as a poet, she was also a marvellous book illustrator. And this beautiful collection of the poetry that I have also features all her drawings. So this is not only the collected poems of Stevie Smith, but the directed, beautiful, impeccable black ink line drawings. And of course, in her lifetime, they were nearly always not published. They were just written off by publishers as being the work of immaturity and naivety. Stevie Smith really was the victim of a lot of sexism. You know, in terms of money, in terms of opportunities to read her work, the way her work was reviewed even. You know, she was a major, major writer, but she never got, in her lifetime at least, she never got the focus of someone like, for example, Philip Larkin. And, you know, she was an incredibly major, important voice who, like so many artists, I guess, has only really found her place in the world after her passing. This is just one poem, of course. This is probably the most famous poem Stevie Smith ever wrote. This is an incredible poem called Not Waving, but Drowning. Nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved larking, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him. His heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, 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 no. It was too cold always. Still, the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning. Oh, what a powerful poem. So minimalist, so, evoking such fragility and that clever use of rhyme and form. Stevie Smith is an absolute once-in-a-generation type talent. And if you want a collection of Stevie Smith, I really recommend this book, getting the collected poems along with her drawings, which she always had such pride in during her lifetime, and it really hurt her that publishers would never publish them alongside the poetry, because she thought the two really went together. And the really whimsical character of so many of her black ink line drawings really juxtapose with some of the highly fraught and difficult subject matter, evoking mental health and even suicidal ideation, like in the poem we just read then. So the line drawings add so much to an experience of the poetry. And here is my poem, fitting in with the Phillip Glass soundtrack for the hours, that minimalism. My poem, as you can see just on this side of the page, if you can see that, it is a very scattered minimalist type thing, and it's riffing off the incredibly powerful film The Hours, but also using Stevie Smith, as you will see. My poem is called On Crying Wolf. On crying wolf, I too, I fear waving, not drowning, I fear. Maybe that's a poem that needs to be read to be actually understood, I'm not sure. But anyway, there's my little riff off The Hours, the film, the Michael Cunningham novel, and all of that stuff on Virginia Woolf and Stevie Smith. I love Stevie Smith. I'm a devotee. All right, film 3. For me, I love the British film called Keeping Mum. It's often described as a black comedy. And I must admit, when I'm watching the film, which I love, and I've watched, dozens and dozens of times, for the last 30 seconds of the movie, I won't tell you what happens if you haven't seen it yourself, but for the last 30 seconds, I always close my eyes. I can't watch the last 30 seconds of this one. It's a marvellous film by Neil Johnson, starring Kirsten Scott Thomas, Maggie Smith, and Rowan Atkinson. And Rowan Atkinson, believe it or not, even though it is a black comedy, so it has a lot of very light, funny bits, the comedy is not caused by Rowan Atkinson. He's not actually a comedic actor in this at all, although he often does things which are very funny unconsciously. The comedy is very much elsewhere in the movie. It's a marvellous performance by Rowan Atkinson. But Kristen Scott Thomas and Maggie Smith, oh my goodness. In many ways, Keeping Mum is also an ekphrastic film. It's a film in response to that marvellous book in the Bible. It's my favourite book in the Hebrew Bible. The Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, it's sometimes called. The Song of Songs, for my money, is this wonderful celebration of God, of God's love for people. They're wanting to be part of our life. And it's a celebration, of course, of human sexuality and that incredible gift that God has breathed into us with creation. It's a remarkable book in the Hebrew Bible, the Song of Songs, and it's not a metaphorical book. The way it describes the body of a woman, for example, breasts with heaps of wheat, as a metaphor, it doesn't work at all. But it's, of course, symbolist language. The language in the Song of Songs, it's all symbolist. And it's about fertility, fecundity, and curves, fertility, life growing within life. It's a marvelous book in the Hebrew Bible, celebrating sexuality and that gift that God has breathed into us at creation. This is my poem in response to Keeping Mum and that remarkable book in the Hebrew Bible, the Song of Songs. My poem is called Song of Songs, and I actually dedicated this poem originally to my ex-partner, Gillian. So I wrote this poem, of course, before our marriage ended. In many ways, for me, as I've lived more and more with my severe depression and PTSD, one of the first things to go for me, of course, was my libido. So this poem is really riffing off that as well. Ironically, since Song of Songs is a celebration of sexuality, this poem is looking at the legacy of my living with no libido. There you go. So it's my poem in response to that remarkable book in the Hebrew Bible, the Song of Songs, and that incredible film, Keeping Mum. Song of Songs. I am no Bond, James Bond, with a little finger so clever, others blush. I have pivoted to a slump, poor John, a dull-witted suicide saved by light, love flooding in like enchantment, even if I still tote a trunk of nagging mixed reviews, a happy horseshit dalliance where the sober meek, long black and lemon cake, since martini whimsy is in me, a bumbling dilettantes swing into the rough. And love shakes me like a teardrop, a blossom falling apart. Can I open to you, Gillian, my dove? Will you linger? I am wilting in your hands to your tongue. Can I stir? Can I love to cherish your pulsating satisfier? To witness your banquet, afterwards holding each other tight. I want back to your comely mouth, better than any wine. Living for so long with someone with PTSD and severe depression is not difficult, so I now live on my own, unfortunately. I took too long to get help, but I am going so much better today. I have my tiny home and my wonderful Billy Blue. Things are going well. And another thing that goes well for me is film. Keeping Mum, The Wrestler, and The Hours. I hope you've enjoyed this time with me as I celebrate my love for 3 marvellous contemporary films. Thank you, and bye for now.